Chapter 7. The third step, returning kindness. Kindness unrepaid weighs more heavily than a great mountain or the ocean. Tsongkhapa in the great treatise on the stages of the path. When you have thoroughly contemplated the previous steps, recognizing all beings as friends and nurturers through a continuum of lives, and appreciating their intentional and unintentional kindnesses, you will indeed feel that you must return their kindness. But how can you help them? No matter what type of prosperity you might be able to bring them within the round of birth, aging, sickness, and death, it would be temporary and superficial. The deepest help would be to lead them to true happiness, the ultimate aim of lifetime after lifetime. Providing opportunities for others to improve their living condition affords temporary and necessary help. But by teaching others specific practices of mind and heart and body, it is possible to lead them to enlightenment. The greatest reciprocation of the kindness of others is liberation from all types of suffering. Meditation. 1. Imagine this. My mother, or best friend in this lifetime, is blind and not in the best frame of mind. She is walking along the edge of a frightful cliff without a guide. It would be awful if I, her own child, did not pay attention and take on the task of helping her. 2. Extend the example. All sentient beings throughout space and time have been my mother, protecting me with great kindness. They do not know what to let go and what to adopt in their behavior in order to create their own happiness. With no spiritual guide, they are walking along the edge of a cliff of frightful suffering within cyclic existence. It would be awful to know that each step brought them closer to misery, and I did not consider their welfare, but only my own freedom. Stay a while with your perception of their perilous situation, feeling its impact. Allow yourself to care about everyone's situation. If this seems vague, reflect on particular beings in such a horrible situation, and then extend your intense feeling to everyone. Success cultivating the earlier steps with regard to individual beings makes this possible. 3. Commit yourself to the welfare of others. Just as they have taken care of you in this and other lifetimes as close friends, or by providing you with essential services, be determined to help them in whatever way is appropriate. I will do whatever I can for these beings, my own nurturing friends, stricken by such suffering. 4. Imagine offering various forms of happiness to living beings. In time, a heartfelt sense of reciprocation will become your first feeling toward others and the bedrock of your relationships. Chapter 8. The fourth step, learning to love. Hail to loving concern for transmigrating beings who are powerless, like a bucket traveling up and down a well, through initially exaggerating oneself, I, and then generating attachment for things. This is mine. Chandrakirti. The fourth step, the generation of love, is described in this and the next 3 chapters. In this chapter, we explore how beings suffer, first applying this understanding to ourselves and then extending it to others. The next chapter gives further detail about how troublesome emotions arise, drawing a clear distinction between love and attachment. In Chapter 10, love freed of bias and attachment is shown to be the basis of human rights. Chapter 11 offers a set of exercises for expanding ordinary feelings of love and concern beyond their usual biased limits in ever-widening spheres. Becoming a friend to all. A loving, altruistic attitude has only one face: kindness to others. However, this altruism helps others and yourself, both right now and in the long run. As the Tibetan Lama Kunu Denzin Gyaltsen said, "If you want to be a friend of all people, generate love and compassion. If you want to be a spiritual guide for all people, generate love and compassion. If you want to help everyone, generate love and compassion." Even if you searched for aeons to find the best method to achieve permanent happiness, you would find that the only way is to generate love and compassion. By becoming truly aware of others and developing respect for them, we ourselves become much happier and more satisfied, which itself has the outward effect of creating an atmosphere of peace. For example, if in a room full of people, someone becomes angry and begins shouting, the atmosphere becomes tense for everyone. However, if every person in a group feels and demonstrates warm feelings and respect for one another, the atmosphere is peaceful and harmonious. The external emanates from the internal. If your motivation is coarse and rude, it will be felt no matter how pleasurable the circumstances. Your internal state is most paramount. If you become overwhelmed by mental discomfort, external things will not help at all. However, if internally there is love, warmth, and kind-heartedness, external problems can be accepted and faced more easily. It is doubtful that problems can be solved with anger. Although it may lead to temporary success with regard to the immediate aim and yield some satisfaction for a brief period, ultimately, anger will cause further difficulties. There is no need to enumerate the many instances of this in the last century and again in this century. With anger, all actions are swift. When we face problems with sincere concern for others, success may take longer, but it will be longer lasting. It is particularly saddening nowadays to realize that many persons in dire distress are not being helped because of political considerations. Some suffer indirectly from the effects of governments putting too much money into armaments, and due to this, neglecting basic needs such as agriculture. The result is that when a natural disaster hits, the situation is hopeless. Others suffer directly from neglect out of discrimination against a community. If one American soldier is killed, it is immediately known, but few bother about how many civilians or combatants are killed on the other side. All of the killed are persons, each valuing his own life. That people in need are ignored or abandoned for political reasons reveals what we are lacking. Though we are intelligent and powerful, strong enough to exploit peoples and destroy the world, we lack real kindness and love. There is an Indian saying, "When an arrow has hit, there is no time to ask who shot it or what kind of arrow it was." Similarly, when we encounter human suffering, it is important to respond with commiseration rather than to question the politics of those we help. Instead of asking whether their country is enemy or friend, we must think, these are human beings, they are suffering, and they have a right to happiness equal to our own. Stopping harming. This body will likely not last longer than 100 or so years, even if we are fortunate. It is not something that can go on to a future lifetime. Its finitude means that physical qualities, such as strength and agility, have a limit. It is important to work on those limitless qualities that will be valuable beyond this lifetime. Attained through mental contemplation, these refined attitudes will also enrich this life. Buddhist practices for training the mind can be summed up in 2 sentences. If you are able, you should help others. If you are not able, you should at least not harm others. Both are based on love and compassion. First, you must gain control over a tendency to harm, voluntarily restraining hurtful physical and verbal actions. The principal physical non-virtues are killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. The principal verbal non-virtues are lying, divisive talk, harsh speech, and senseless chatter. The principal mental non-virtues are covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views. These 10 cause suffering both for others and for you. Killing means to end the life of a sentient being, either through your own actions or through compelling another to do it. Sometimes it stems from desire, as in killing an animal out of attachment to meat. Other times it is due to enmity, as in revenge, or it can even be due to rank confusion, as in thinking that animal sacrifice is beneficial. Every one of us has the potential to commit a crime such as murder. As long as desire, hatred, attachment, jealousy, or ignorance are present, crime is possible. Stealing arises mainly from desire, to take someone else's possession by deceit, as when a shopkeeper uses inaccurate scales, or by force, as in mugging, or by burglary. Sexual misconduct is motivated mainly by desire to copulate with an unsuitable partner, as in adultery or rape. Lying arises from a motivation to dissemble, as in saying to another person, "I saw such and such," when you did not. You can mislead with words or with physical gestures. Divisive speech intends to divide others who are in harmony, or to cause further disagreement between enemies seeking reconciliation. It can be done overtly, covertly with deception, or indirectly through implication. Harsh speech arises from wanting to say something unpleasant, usually out of hatred, about another person, either directly to the person's face, covertly as in jest, or indirectly through gossip. Senseless talk is usually driven by obscuration and obliviousness. To distract with idle chatter those who are trying to practice spiritual development is particularly destructive, both to oneself and others. Covetousness is repeatedly wishing for another's possessions. Arising mainly from desire, it is particularly harmful when you have no shame or embarrassment about it and do not try to stop it. Harmful intent arises from hatred, as in the intention to kill another in battle. Or it can arise from jealousy, as in wanting to harm a rival, or from an unwillingness to forgive an enemy. Harmful intent has particularly powerful effects when it is considered a good quality that does not need to be corrected. Wrong views are long-standing notions that virtues and ill deeds are not the causes of happiness and suffering, respectively, and the denial that spiritual practice is effective. Wrong views come to fullness when you decide to look no further for the truth. It is important to understand that counterproductive actions of body and speech do not just arise by themselves, but spring from dependence upon mental motivation. The influence of faulty states of mind causes faulty actions to be produced. Thus, to control negative physical and verbal actions, it is necessary to get at their root, the mind, and tame it. This level of the practice of love can be included within one sentence: do not harm others. Helping. The next level begins when you can bring these destructive factors somewhat under your own control, giving you a better chance to help others. Altruism is the spirit out of which we choose to take action and give aid that brings happiness to others. Even a small experience of altruism brings a measure of mental peace right away. If altruism is the heart of good deeds, then great love and great compassion are the heart of such deeds. The truly altruistic person is moved by the suffering of each and every sentient being, and wishes to join them with happiness and its causes, and to free them from suffering and its causes. Perhaps a selfish person is far superior to an animal, since animals are bound in such great misery. But both place their own welfare at the center of all thought and activity. Animals eat and drink to fulfill their own superficial purposes. People merely involved in their own progress lack the magnificence of those who are willing to dwell in the blazing fire of the pains of the world in order to remove even one type of suffering from a single sentient being. Such people are powerful, effective, wise, and possess unusually great strength of feeling. Those training in great love should forsake self-centeredness and engage in the Buddha's own practice, the root of which is compassion. You may be thinking, love is indeed very profound, but I do not have the skill to practice it. I will focus my efforts on practices aimed at getting myself out of cyclic existence instead. On one hand, this is true, because you should choose a path of development appropriate to your ability. On the other hand, there is great advantage in attempting the highest degree of love you can. Even if you cannot actually implement the practices of love and compassion, merely hearing about them establishes powerful predispositions for future success. This can be amplified by planting prayer wishes aspiring to altruism. Do not be discouraged. It is difficult to absorb such a profound perspective. Be courageous and think of your own future potential. It is particularly important to do the best you can. As the 8th century Indian scholar yogi Shantideva says, in A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, there is immeasurable benefit even in wishing that all sentient beings be freed from a single suffering, such as a headache. If even those who think, I will clear away just the headaches of living beings, have such a beneficial intention that they gain immeasurable merit, then what is there to say of one who aspires to clear away the immeasurable unhappiness of each being and to endow each with immeasurable good qualities? In a former lifetime, while Buddha was an ordinary being, before he became enlightened, he was reborn in a hell where, due to his former negative actions, karma, a device appeared on the top of his head and began churning up his brain. Immediately reflecting on the fact that this suffering was caused by his own earlier behavior, he contemplated other sentient beings who were suffering in a similar manner and made a wish that through his own pain, all other beings could be relieved of all such pain. At that moment, the device lifted off his head. He was freed from that hell and reborn as a human. If such great benefit arises from wishing that all beings be freed from a single type of suffering, think how amazingly beneficial it is to wish that all beings be freed from all suffering. As Nagarjuna says, there is merit in making donations to poor monastics, but love is even more powerful. Even 3 times a day to offer 300 pots of food to the needy does not match a portion of the merit in one instant of love. Even after many aeons of rebirths, it is difficult to follow the auspicious words teaching this good path. Yet it is truly wonderful that we're able to admire and to practice such a path. The greatness of Tibetan culture lies in the detail of its teachings on how to cultivate love and compassion. Some people think it is the nature of Tibetan people to be relaxed and to uphold good character, even though they're in a state of unusual suffering in an occupied nation. But the Tibetan approach arises from a way of thinking, a willingness to use bad circumstances on the spiritual path. Most Tibetans are not distressed. Their inner freedom from anxiety shows itself outwardly as an easygoing manner. Among practitioners, the best are those whose compassion extends even to a bug. It is perhaps in this respect that people notice something different about the Tibetan people. Indeed, some Tibetans kill animals while reciting a mantra like Om Mani Padme Hum, which is supposed to be repeated with the aim of cleansing various types of afflictive emotions in themselves and other sentient beings that lead to uncontrolled rebirth. But in general, Tibetans are quite compassionate and merciful. For instance, most Tibetans look down on hunting, whereas in some Buddhist countries, hunting is not considered bad. It is certainly not that Tibetans already have developed a high degree of altruism, but they do have a healthy sense of it. The teaching of compassion was widely disseminated in Tibet, and over time its people have internalized the intention to become enlightened in order to be more effective in helping others. You should realize your great fortune at having encountered such an altruistic teaching and understand how important it is to put it into practice, if only as something you wish to develop. Even those who do not know much about spiritual development can appreciate that those who possess an other-directed attitude have great power of mind. In Buddhism, such beings are called bodhisattvas, those who are heroically intent, sattva, on achieving enlightenment, bodhi, in order to help others more effectively. Ultimately, bodhisattvas seek to establish each sentient being in Buddhahood. For the sake of others, they are willing to give freely of their own resources, stores of virtuous karma that would yield pleasant results for themselves, and anything else that might be appropriate, without even the slightest feeling that this is mine. They consider the welfare of others in all aspects of their own behavior, no matter what activity of body, speech, or mind they are engaging in. Even their inhalation and exhalation of breath serve others. These persons do indeed have unusual strength of mind to generate such altruism. This is why bodhisattvas are known as heroes contemplating enlightenment. Although it is difficult right away to achieve the full scope of altruism, you can work on beneficial predispositions toward it. Even if those who know little or nothing about spiritual development work at this attitude, which indeed is the sole path of the Buddhas in the past, present, and future, they can eventually realize enlightenment, overcoming both the obstacles to liberation from the round of pain and the barriers to full knowledge. Knowing how you and others suffer. The cultivation of love requires understanding that all beings want happiness and all beings are beset by suffering. Without identifying every kind of suffering, there is no way for love to be anything but partial. It is easy to feel a degree of love and compassion for a person in an obviously destitute situation, but it is difficult to commiserate with someone living in prosperity. This is a sign that we have not grasped the scope of suffering, that we have not understood what cyclic existence means. What kinds of suffering do we undergo? Ordinary pain, suffering from change, and the unfortunate results of pervasive conditioning. We all know mental and physical pain, from headaches to back pain to sore feelings. Everyone wants to be free of it. The suffering from change is much harder to recognize. The simple fact that most ordinary pleasures easily turn into pain if overused shows that these temporary pleasures have an underlying nature of pain. For instance, if a good meal really had an inner nature of pleasure, then no matter how much we ate, we would feel happier and happier. However, when we eat too much of even the finest foods, we suffer. It is difficult to think of a pleasurable experience that, if overindulged in, does not have an inner nature of pain. Beyond ordinary pain and the suffering of change, there is a much deeper level of suffering that is the hardest to recognize as such. That is, as something we need to overcome. Called pervasive conditioning, it is the fact that our mind and body do not operate completely under our own control, but are under the influence of karmas, which are tendencies created by previous actions, as well as emotions such as lust and hatred. In ordinary life, we are born from and into the pervasive influence of karma and afflictive emotions. Even when we do not think we are feeling anything, we are under the influence of causes and conditions beyond our control, stuck in a cycle that is prone to suffering. When you realize how this cycle makes you susceptible to all sorts of unwanted events, you want to get rid of it as much as you would want to remove a speck of dust from your eye. Suffering is a disease we all have. By diagnosing these three types of suffering, we can, over time, get a grasp on the full scope of the disease. The revolving door of consciousness. Since ordinary consciousness leads to suffering, let us take a look at different states of mind. The mind of ordinary activities is very coarse. When we fall asleep and dream, there is a subtler level of consciousness. In heavy, dreamless sleep, there is another, more subtle type of consciousness. These three states of mind all occur while the body is still breathing, whereas in fainting, there are occasions when breath stops and the mind becomes even more subtle. Finally, at death, the subtlest of minds is manifest. When the force of karma that drives your present lifetime is spent, you will die. During this passage, warmth gradually moves from the extremities of the body toward the heart, where an extremely subtle consciousness manifests itself before consciousness finally exits. When this most subtle consciousness ceases, the intermediate state between lives begins. At this time, as an intermediate being between your former and future lives, you take on the form of your next lifetime and seek a place of rebirth. If you are to be reborn as a human, you arrive at the place where the man and woman having the karma of being your parents are lying together. You approach with lust, desiring the mother if you are to be reborn as a boy, and desiring the father if you are to be reborn as a girl. You rush to them to engage in sex. When you cannot slake your desire, you become angry, and your life as an intermediate being ends. You are reborn to your next lifetime. Once again, you are born, age, become sick, and die. The same process repeats over and over. Even between lives, you accumulate karma every minute. What causes this succession of many forms of suffering? Distressing emotions, mainly the three poisons of lust, hatred, and ignorance, and actions flowing from those afflictions, such as the 10 non-virtues discussed earlier. Meditation. 1. Reflect on the fact that in your own life you naturally want to overcome the obvious pains of sickness, aging, and death. Think of particular physical and mental pains. 2. Think about ordinary pleasures. Are they pleasurable in and of themselves, or is it true that, when they are indulged continuously, they turn into pain? If so, this reveals the deeper nature of pain. 3. Consider how nice it would be to be beyond being deceived by ordinary pleasures. 4. Recall a pleasure that turned into pain. Reflect on how the deeper nature of the pleasure revealed itself. Determine that in the future, when a situation turns painful, you will realize that its inner nature has shown itself. 5. Consider that you are caught in a pervasive process of conditioning beyond your control, and see how it makes you susceptible to the karma and afflictive emotions that are forms of suffering. When you want to remove this conditioning, as much as you want to get rid of physical pain like a particle in your eye, and mental pain like the sorrow of separation from friends, you will understand the full scope of suffering in cyclic life. Extending this understanding to others. By understanding the range and depth of your own suffering, you gain a measure of progress toward turning away from overindulging in the pleasurable appearances of this lifetime, and from striving too vigorously for fortunate situations in future lifetimes. Instead, you begin seeking liberation from the whole process of cyclic existence. Even more so, the search for liberation should be infused with altruism. Otherwise, there is danger that the mind will be diverted toward wanting a state of solitary peace and freedom from suffering for yourself alone. Extend the realization of the various forms of your cyclic existence to other beings and develop love and compassion for them. Dedicate yourself to relieving others from suffering and helping them attain happiness. As the 14th century Tibetan scholar yogi Tsongkhapa says, if your mind has not been affected by thinking about the ways that you yourself wander in cyclic existence, then when you think about these sufferings in other sentient beings, there is no way that you, as a beginner, can find their pain unbearable. Therefore, first you should think about these in yourself, and afterward meditate on them in other sentient beings. Reflection on how others are trapped in cyclic existence the same way you are will increase your natural compassion. You and all sentient beings want happiness and do not want suffering. No matter how important you are only one person. Therefore, your aim in seeking to attain full personal development, mental and physical, should be to assist vast numbers of sentient beings to gain relief and freedom. This is the motivation that a spiritual practitioner needs to bring to every endeavor. Meditation. 1. Bring to mind a friend and reflect how this person suffers from mental and physical pain, suffers from mistakenly seeing only temporary pleasures as having an inner nature of happiness, and suffers from being caught in a process of death and rebirth outside of her control, just as you are. 2. Extend this reflection to more and more friends, one by one. 3. Extend it further to several neutral persons, one by one. 4. Consider how the least of your enemies suffers from mental and physical pain, suffers from mistakenly seeing only temporary pleasures as having an inner nature of happiness, and suffers from being caught in a process of death and rebirth outside of his control, just as you are. 5. Slowly extend this to more and more of those who have harmed you or your friends. You will find that over the course of weeks and months, your attitude toward others will become healthier and more realistic. Lust and hatred are unrealistic. Love and compassion are realistic. Artificial barriers will disappear. Chapter 9. The difference between love and attachment. Like salt water, pleasurable things increase attachment no matter how much they are used. The altruistic practice by viewing them as like a summer rainbow, appearing to be beautiful but untrue, thereby avoiding attachment and lust. Bodhisattva Tokme Sambo. To generate true love, you need to know how it differs from attachment. Ordinary love and compassion are intertwined with attachment because their motivations are selfish. You care about certain people because they temporarily help you or your friends. As Nagarjuna's Precious Garland says, thought involved with attachment to others is an intention to help or not to help due to being affected by desire or an intent to harm. Because such love and compassion are under the sway of attachment, they cannot be extended to enemies, only friends, your spouse, children, parents, and so forth. Whereas, if love and compassion thrive within the clear recognition of the importance and rights of others, they will reach even those who would do you harm. From childhood, I have had a tendency toward love and compassion, but it was biased. When two dogs were fighting, I would have strong feelings for the one who lost. Even when two bugs fought, I had strong concern for the smaller one, but would be angry at the winner. That shows that my love and compassion were biased. In turning away from attachment, you need not ignore essential needs such as food, shelter, and sleep. Rather, you should separate yourself from superficial distractions that elicit such exclamations as, "This is wonderful! I must have this! Oh, if I only could have this!" When you give your life over to such thoughts, finery and money become more attractive than spiritual development. Distressing emotions increase, leading to trouble, disturbing yourself and those around you, while you figure out ways to satisfy these emotions, causing yet more trouble. Driven ragged by attachment, you find no comfort. The best way to overcome counterproductive attachments is to realize that the very nature of life is that what is gathered will eventually disperse. Parents, children, brothers, sisters, and friends. No matter how much friends love each other, eventually they must part. The mistake is to see these situations as inherently pleasurable. Attachment is built on this misperception. and will always cause more pain. Good fortune is not permanent. Consequently, it is dangerous to become too attached to things going well. An outlook of permanence is ruinous. When the present becomes your preoccupation, the future does not matter, which undermines your motivation to engage in compassionate practices for the future enlightenment of others. An outlook of impermanence helps. By seeing that the true nature of things is disintegration, you will not be shocked by change when it occurs, not even death. How troublesome emotions arise. Lust and hatred are generated within a conception of ourselves as being very solid. Once there is a solidly existent, palpable, overly concrete I, there is discrimination from the other. Once there is I, there is also you. Discrimination is followed by attachment to your solid self and anger toward the other side. As the 7th century Indian scholar yogi Chandrakirti says, beings are powerless like a bucket traveling up and down a well through initially exaggerating oneself, I, and then generating attachment for things. This is mine. Beings who first conceive of a solidly existent I also conceive of solidly existent things that can be owned. Through the force of this process, discrimination of self and other, and attachment to objects, we wander through better and worse states of cyclic existence, like a bucket traveling powerlessly up and down a well. It is crucial to identify in your own experience that persons and things appear as if they exist in and of themselves, but they do not. If the person or object appears pleasant, two powerful streams of attraction are produced: attachment to yourself and attachment to the pleasurable person or object. Your attachment to the feeling of pleasure itself draws you into distressing actions and thereby into cyclic problems. As long as you deny the true nature of people and things, you will believe that both inherently exist. It will not be long before desire and hatred enter the picture. The nature of attachment. Attachment increases desire without producing any satisfaction. There are two types of desire: unreasonable and reasonable. The first is an affliction founded on ignorance, but the second is not. To live, you need resources. Therefore, desire for sufficient material things is appropriate. Such feelings as, "This is good, I want this is useful," are not afflictions. It is also desirable to achieve altruism, wisdom, and liberation. This kind of desire is suitable. Indeed, all human development comes out of desire, and these aspirations do not have to be an affliction. For instance, when you have developed an affinity for all sentient beings and desire that they all should have happiness, such desire is valid because it is unbiased. It covers all sentient beings. It is likely that our present love, being limited to friends and family, is heavily influenced by ignorant attachment. It is biased. Counterproductive desire is unreasonable attachment to persons and things. This inevitably leads to lack of contentment. Ask yourself if you really need most of these things, and the answer is no. This type of desire has no limit, no way to satisfy itself. It leads ultimately to suffering. You must put a brake on this kind of desire. In the early stages of practice, it is difficult to distinguish between useful desire and afflictive desire. A practitioner might feel love and compassion, but still hold the ignorant idea that himself and the object of that love and compassion are inherently established. At the beginning of spiritual practice, even ignorance can serve as an aid to enlightenment. When you first cultivate love and compassion, even if ignorance and attachment are involved, it would be a mistake to stop practicing. The only good choice is to continue. To overcome attachment, you cannot just withdraw your mind from objects. Instead, you must overcome attachment through the practice of realizing the opposite of ignorance. However, when you have attachment to material things, it is best to desist from those very activities that promote more attachment. Satisfaction is helpful when it comes to material things, but not with respect to spiritual practice. Objects to which we become attached are something to be discarded, whereas spiritual progress is something to be adopted. It can be developed limitlessly, even in old age. Although in the beginning it is difficult to distinguish between afflictive and non-afflictive desire, through sustained investigation and analysis, you can gradually identify ignorance and the afflictive emotions, making your practice more and more pure. Attachment is one-sided, narrowly focused on yourself for just the short term. The more attached you become, the more biased and narrow you become. Even small things will disturb you. Detachment involves the absence of that kind of narrow-mindedness, but it does not mean that you have given up interest. Because we need a wide range of things, we need detachment. So in order to be more open-minded, more holistic, detachment is needed. Attachment shuts things out. It is an obstacle. Students who become overly attached to one subject become lopsided. Many subjects need to be studied. The general procedure of narrow-minded, worldly life is summed up by what are called the 8 worldly concerns: like, dislike, gain, loss, praise, blame, fame, disgrace. The worldly way of life is to be unhappy when the 4 unfavorable ones, dislike, loss, blame, and disgrace, happen to you or your friends, but to be pleased when these happen to your enemies. These results are all based on how people act, whereas true love and compassion are based not on actions, but on the crucial fact that these sentient beings want happiness and do not want suffering like you, and thus are all equal. Some actions are positive and some are negative, but the agents of those actions are all sentient beings with aspirations to happiness. We always need to look from that angle. Actions are secondary, since they are sometimes positive and sometimes negative, always changing, whereas there is never any change in the fact that beings want happiness and do not want suffering. When a shocking event happens, whether during the day or when dreaming, our immediate response is I, not Tibetan, not American, or any other nationality, not Buddhist, not Hindu, or any other system, but just I. This shows us the basic human level. On that important level, all are the same. Little children do not bother about religion and nationality, rich or poor. They just want to play together. At a young age, the sense of oneness of humanity is much more fresh. As we grow older, we make a lot of distinctions, a lot of artificial creations that are actually secondary become more important, and basic human concern diminishes. That is a problem. Love thrown into bias by lust and hatred eventually must be stopped. Love influenced by afflictive desire necessarily brings with it hatred at what opposes it, and along with that comes jealousy and all sorts of problems. Though lust itself does not directly harm, it indirectly brings about all the forces that harm. This is why the process of expanding love begins with developing equanimity, after which the main point is not whether a particular person is good or bad to you, but the fact that the person is the same as yourself in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Since this desire resides in all sentient beings, your awareness of it can apply to everyone, making the basis of your love very stable. Once you put the emphasis on their similarity to yourself, love has a solid foundation that does not vacillate depending on temporary circumstances. In my own practice, when I consider, for instance, a particular person who is currently torturing Tibetans in my homeland, I do not concentrate on that person's bad attitude and bad behavior, but reflect on the fact that this is a human who, like myself, wants happiness and does not want suffering, but is voluntarily bringing pain to himself and intentionally destroying his own happiness. Looking at things from this perspective, my response is love and compassion. I choose that perspective, that angle. If I considered the person as an enemy harming Tibetans, love would not be my response. One of the chief reasons why lust and hatred arise is that we are too attached to this lifetime. We want to believe it is permanent, that it will last forever, and so we concentrate too much on temporary circumstances and place too much value on material goods. The only way to get around this is to reflect on the fact that all things pass. You too will pass away. As the 13th and 14th century Tibetan adept Togme Sambo says, it is a practice of the altruistic to diminish the hold of this life. Close friends who companied together for a long time separate. The wealth and articles achieved with striving are left behind, and the guest house of the body is left by the guest of consciousness. No matter how long we live, at most around 100 years, eventually we must die, losing this valuable human life. And it could happen at any time, This life will disintegrate, no matter how much prosperity we have. No amount of wealth can buy an extension of your life. On the day of death, nothing you have accumulated can help. You have to leave it all behind. In this respect, the death of a rich person and the death of a wild animal are alike. Under the sway of attachment, the object appears to be good through and through, but in reality it is not that way. When attachment starts to develop, try to find negative qualities in the object of your desire. Once attachment has set in, it is very difficult to suppress. Your best chance is to try distracting your attention from the object, perhaps even physically leaving it behind. Attachment to a close friend can be so strong that it leads to upsetting that loved one at the time of her dying. Grasping at a person's hand, tearfully embracing her, even moaning in front of her, by causing her to cling to this lifetime, these actions can ruin any chance of the dying person's generating a virtuous frame of mind. A friend should provide conditions for virtuous thoughts by reminding the dying person of religious instructions and practices with gentle speech. The dying person should be reminded that there will be many unusual appearances caused by karma during death. It is crucial to understand that there is no point in being attached to the pleasant appearances or angered by the unpleasant ones. A strong will. It is important to aspire to bring about the well-being of others and to develop that aspiration so that it becomes stronger and stronger. This is not attachment because it is not mixed with afflictive emotions. The strong aspiration arises from detachment. A strong ego is needed, but without becoming egotistical. You need a strong will to achieve the good. To make a wish that you become able to help all beings throughout space, you need a strong self. With a weak self, such an intention is impossible. This kind of desire is reasonable and is not attachment. It is to be adopted in practice. Unreasonable desire is to be diminished and discarded because of its narrowness. Making this life meaningful. Loosening your hold on this lifetime does not mean that you should stop taking care of yourself and others. When I suggest that you view the body as having a nature of suffering, it does not mean that you should neglect the body. Your body can help you achieve great aims. As Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life says, relying upon the boat of a human body, free yourself from the great river of suffering. The marvelous prosperity and boundless resources of any life in cyclic existence will ultimately deteriorate, but the body should be viewed as fortuitous for bringing about others' welfare. As such, it has to be nourished and developed within an attitude of non-attachment. It is necessary to take care of our present condition within a state of mind turned toward future lifetimes. Buddha teaches that one should not practice extremes. Torturing yourself is an extreme that should be avoided. As Nagarjuna's precious garland of advice says, practice is not done by mortifying the body, since you have not forsaken injuring others and are not helping others. When you disregard the basic needs of the body, you harm the many sentient organisms that live within the body. You should also avoid the opposite extreme of living in great luxury. It is possible to make use of even good food, clothing, residence, and furnishings without producing afflictive emotions such as attachment, pride, and arrogance. The crucial point is the control of internal factors such as lust and attachment. External factors are not, in and of themselves, good or bad. It is not suitable if attachment increases toward even mediocre food, clothing, and so forth. Contentment is the key. If you have contentment with material things, you are truly rich. Without it, even if you are a billionaire, you will not have happiness. You will always feel hungry and want more and more and more, making you not rich, but poor. If you seek contentment externally, it will never happen. Your desire will never be fulfilled. Our texts speak of a king who gained control over the world, at which point he began thinking about taking over the lands of the gods. In the end, his good qualities were destroyed by pride. Contentment is necessary for happiness, so try to be satisfied with adequate food, clothing, and shelter. For a layperson, sexual excitement is generally not considered to be wrong, but too much emphasis on it can bring disaster. Everything needs to be felt and enacted in a balanced way. This is essential. Too much excitation and sexual attachment can be the seed of divorce. Tolerance is also necessary. When Buddha was meditating before he became enlightened, seemingly external evil forces came to torment him. He did not respond with aggression or threaten military action. He just meditatively cultivated love and compassion, and through that practice destroyed the force of evil. Giving up attachment to the world does not mean that you separate yourself from it. When you generate a reasoned desire for the happiness of others, your humanness increases in strength. As you become more detached from the world, rather than denying your humanity, you become more humane. Buddha himself set forth vows of altruism for laypersons and for monastics, which means that he envisioned practitioners with families. The very purpose of Buddhist practice is to help others. In order to do so, you must remain in society.